The Trump administration continues to ramp up threats to bring the National Guard to other Democratic-run cities across the country.
President Trump also signed an executive order yesterday threatening to pull federal funding from local and state governments that allow cashless bail. The president has been focusing on public safety in cities in recent weeks, citing what he says is a spike in violent crime, despite data that says the exact opposite. A few weeks ago, he deployed National Guard troops and federal agents to Washington, despite objections from the city's mayor. Mr. Trump says that he hopes Democrats will get on board with him.
You really want to be asked to go. You know, I hate to barge in on a city and then be treated horribly by corrupt politicians and bad politicians. I think the Democrats better get smart. And, you know, politically, I hope they don't. But actually, in terms of love for the country, I hope they do, because it will be good to work together.
President Trump also took the step of firing Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook from her post, effective immediately. In response, Cook says the president has no authority to fire her and that she will not resign from her position. In a moment, NBC's Gary Grumbach will have the latest on Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who's now back in ICE custody but remains in the U.S., at least for now. We're also going to have legal analysis on a variety of issues from Danny Savalos. But let's begin with NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba, who is in Washington. Monica, good morning. So last night, President Trump removed Lisa Cook from her role. She's a Federal Reserve governor. As we mentioned, she's fighting back. Explain why the president says he's removing her. And as far as we know, does he even have the authority to do it?
Well, Joe and Savannah, this is something that the president had teased he was thinking about doing. He had implied that if she didn't resign, he was going to move to fire her. And now that is what he is attempting to do. But it is an open question. We're not entirely sure he has this authority. And according to Lisa Cook, she says that she is not going to be stepping away because he doesn't. She's going to argue that he is trying to fire her. And in this letter, he wrote that it was for cause for some alleged mortgage fraud allegations. And she says, because there have been no charges on that front, there hasn't been any evidence put forward, that she's not going to do that. And this does not appear to have ever happened in history, Joe and Savannah, so that's why we simply don't know. And likely this is headed to the courts next. But it really cements this idea that the president wants to get control of this independent board of governors that works for the central bank. And its independence has been something that has been maintained up until this point. But that is clear in what the president has been doing, not just on this front, but his rhetoric with the Fed chair, Jay Powell, who it does not appear he has the right to remove, and his term is up in a couple of months. But this all points to the idea that the president wants to be able to control this and wants to have a majority of appointees on this board.
Monica, we also want to ask you about this possibility here, President Trump's threat to bring in federal law enforcement to other cities around the country. Specifically, there is a back and forth going on between the president and the governor of Illinois over the city of Chicago. Tell us about this.
Yeah, so obviously here in D.C. there are different rules. There's a different structure for what you can do, and that's why the National Guard has been out on the streets, and the president can do that under his authority. When it comes to other cities, there are questions about how that would work, and that's why the president signed an executive order yesterday, essentially trying to create these federalized mini units of National Guard troops that he says then could be sent into other cities. But even the president said he's not sure whether he would send them in before governors ask for it, and the Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker has been very clear about his position on that and how he feels about the president at this time. Take a listen to how he put it.
What President Trump is doing is unprecedented and unwarranted. It is illegal. It is unconstitutional. It is un-American. This is not about fighting crime. This is about Donald Trump searching for any justification to deploy the military in a blue city, in a blue state, to try and intimidate his political rivals.
Now, remember that the president also did send in the military to California to deal with immigration enforcement there. But when they are in that capacity, they can only support law enforcement. They can't carry rifles or other kind of weapons, for instance, like some of the troops are here now in Washington, guys.
Monica, one more headline here. President Trump continuing to target his predecessor, former President Joe Biden. He says he's planning to go after the 46th president's advisors, saying they need to, quote, be brought down. So who exactly is he threatening to go after? Why? And what's some of the reaction to this?
Well, it sounds like the president is targeting former President Biden's closest advisors, some of those top aides who were influential and part of those really big decisions. We've seen some of them come and go on Capitol Hill, where they are also being subpoenaed for information. And remember, it was President Trump who waived their protections to essentially say, no, I don't want to appear for that. So we've seen a parade of some of those aides come and go. And again, this is something the president has said before, but it's unclear exactly what he means in terms of, quote, going after them. Joe and Savannah.
Monica Alba. Monica, thank you so much.
Let's now bring in our friend, NBC News legal analyst, Danny Cevallos. Danny, good morning. Thanks, as always, for being here with us. So I want to go back a moment just to talking about bringing the National Guard to other cities. Monica kind of laid out how it's a little bit different given the structure of the District of Columbia is different than states. So walk us through legally what power the president has as commander-in-chief to do something like that.
Exactly right. The District of Columbia is not a state. It is a federal creation, and it is run and governed by the federal government. For example, street crimes are not prosecuted by state prosecutors. They're prosecuted by federal prosecutors because that's the only law in D.C. In a way, it's different than our territories like Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. They have their own local government. D.C. does, but everybody there is federal at their core. So the president has considerably more power to nationalize the National Guard, to federalize them, and send them into D.C. Not so with cities. However, under either the Insurrection Act or another federal law, the president can take over or send National Guard troops into an American city, but he needs a pretty good reason under federal law under the Insurrection Act.
A lot of issues here making headlines. Another one, as we mentioned earlier, the president signed this executive order. It's aimed at eliminating cashless bail in D.C. and some other jurisdictions. Walk us through what this is all about.
So this is fascinating. Now, the one thing the president cannot do is simply order the states to get rid of cashless bail. That would violate the 10th Amendment. The states get to make their own rules in certain areas, and cashless bail would likely be one of them, would surely be one of them. But here's an interesting example of how this one's going to work. Why do you think the national drinking age in America is 21? Here's why. Back in the 80s, every state was allowed to make their own national drinking age. But the federal government passed a law. It didn't say thou shalt make it 21. Instead, they said, do you guys like federal highway funding?
Right.
If you do, then you should make your drinking age 21. If not, then we will take away 5 to 10% of your highway funding. And guess what happened?
Voila.
Every state said, except I think Louisiana was the last holdout. Every state said, you know what? We're gonna try and go this. No, we're not. We want highway funding. Therefore, the national drinking age is now 21. This is an example of what the Constitution calls the spending power. The federal government has far more power in the power of the purse than the power to order states to do things. That's why you see the federal government often use this spending power, dangling money in front of the states to make the states capitulate.
One more executive order to ask you about yesterday. This was signed as well, aimed at prosecuting people who desecrate the American flag. How does this one work? What's the legality here?
So the executive order goes to great pains to not try to outright outlaw burning the flag because, frankly, they can't. The Supreme Court precedent on this is pretty clear. Instead, what it does is frame it differently. There's one thing that doesn't violate the First Amendment. It's called time, place, and manner restriction. So in other words, I can't pass a law that says you cannot play Barry Manilow music loudly. But what I can do is say you can play no music loudly. I don't care what it is. Britney Spears, Taylor Swift, doesn't matter. Can't play anything loud after 10 o'clock. That is not a violation of the First Amendment because it's just generally all noise. It's not content specific. That's what this executive order tries to do. It frames it a different way. It says, well, this is an arson risk. So burning stuff in general is bad, and also it might be federal property. That is bad. We can outlaw those things. But we're not trying to say that you can't use your First Amendment protections to speak freely. So it tries to avoid that. But I think a court is going to look at the real intent behind it, and they state the intent. It's to stop burning the flag.
All right, Danny Cevallos, thank you as always.
Stick around.
Yeah, we'll have you in just a minute.
Cabana here, we have a few more issues to talk with you in a moment. All right. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, is back in ICE custody after just 3 days of freedom. Abrego was taken into custody after appearing for an immigration check-in in Baltimore yesterday. That check-in was a condition of his release from federal custody on Friday when he was reunited with his family after 160 days apart.
So the Trump administration has signaled they want to deport Abrego Abrego to Uganda. That's a country that he has no ties to. He's also been charged with human trafficking and being a gang member. Those are charges he denies. But a federal judge ruled yesterday that Abrego Garcia cannot be deported, at least for now.
NBC News legal affairs reporter Gary Grumbach joins us now from Washington with more on this. Gary, good morning. So much back and forth in this case. We know Abrego was detained, then deported, then brought back and released a few days ago, only to be back in custody now. Bring us up to speed on where things stand following yesterday's hearing.
So this is an incredibly complex case, and in large part due to the haphazard nature of the Trump administration's immigration policy here. But Kilmar Abrego Garcia this morning is waking up in a ICE detention center in Farmville, Virginia, 200 miles from where he was yesterday morning, because a federal judge said that she's really concerned about the Uganda of all of this. And she said there's not really agreements and conditions put in place to make sure when he gets to Uganda, he's actually safe. So when he gets to Uganda, there's no agreement that he's actually going to be out of custody. Would he be in the U.S. custody? Would he be in Uganda custody? That's not known. Would he be given refugee status? That's not known. He certainly can't speak the language over there. He certainly does not know anyone in Uganda. And so that is a serious concerns for the judge. She's going to hold an evidentiary hearing later this week where she hopes to get to the bottom of if not Uganda, where else? And one of the places could be Costa Rica, a country that was on the table during a potential plea agreement earlier this week, Joe.
Gary, you were outside this ICE facility in Baltimore yesterday where Abrego Garcia was taken into custody. Tell us what you saw. What was it like there on the ground?
It was an incredibly emotional scene, and it was remarkable to see hundreds and hundreds of people, community members that have never met Kilmar Abrego Garcia or his family, that did not know him, only knew his story through the news media, and were coming out there to support a man who was going to walk in that building and not come out a free man. That was the expectation largely from everyone there. And it was, an emotional, but I don't think we have video of this part, but when Kilmar Abrego Garcia walked in the front door of that building right there, there was about 20 or 30 people that were also standing in line for ICE check-ins. And it made me think perhaps those people did not have the legal representation that Kilmar does. And perhaps those people don't have the media attention that Kilmar does. And some of those people may not have been walking out of there free as well, guys.
Gary, you mentioned Uganda and Costa Rica are the two options on the table for Abrego's deportation. His attorney said he won't accept a plea deal. So where does it seem Abrego could go from here?
So this seems like it's going to be figured out by this federal judge in Maryland, because if she says Uganda is not the right place for him, he won't be going to Uganda. Now, I think she's going to make it work until she finds a country that does work for Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Perhaps Costa Rica is that answer, because the government offered that up. And it's a place where he would have refugee status. It's a place where he does speak the language. And it's a place that is outside of the United States, keeping both the DOJ happy and Kilmar Abrego Garcia's team at least happier. Guys.
All right, Gary, thank you so much.
All right, and Danny Savalos, he is still here for some analysis on this case as well. So, Danny, let's talk these options for deportation. Uganda and Costa Rica, two places he has no ties to. I mean, what is the legal basis for that? And is there anything standing in the way of that happening?
Well, the one thing standing in the way is that there isn't a pre-existing order saying that the one place you can't send Abrego Garcia to is El Salvador. And that is because he showed a credible reason that he might be persecuted there. Beyond that, it is largely up to federal discretion. But the judge is correct that if he doesn't have an opportunity to contest whether he would be subject to some kind of harm there, then that is the basis of this habeas petition that they filed just, I think, yesterday in an emergency fashion. I don't know how they're getting these out so quickly, but they're somehow pulling it off. So that is one of the key things the judge is going to look at. But what we're learning is that the federal government really has a lot of options here. Normally, what they do is send the person back to the first option, which is the country from whence they came. But what we're finding here is that the federal government is now using these creative ideas, sending someone to Uganda who has no contacts with Uganda and doesn't necessarily speak the language or dialect there. So this is something I think that's going to be hashed out in the courts. But the most pressing issue is figuring out whether the country they want to send him to is somewhere that is dangerous for him.
At the hearing yesterday, the judge said she wants Abrego to stay in the U.S. until she can have an evidentiary hearing.
Oh, she was very clear about that.
Yeah, no kidding. So what happens if the Trump administration just ignores that, sends him to Uganda anyway?
Yeah, the judge, you put it, the way the judge actually put it was more like, thou shalt not remove I want to be crystal clear. Nobody's taking him out of the continental United States. You knew that. And it was, it's something that in the past with Abrego Garcia, there may have been some wiggle room in the language of both the orders, what was in the written order, and what was said in open court. This judge is leaving no ambiguity. One of the things the Trump administration likes to do is look at orders carefully and say, did they technically say we could do this or not this? And then they go forward, because in their mind, they're saying we didn't violate the order. By the way, this is what a lot of litigants do anyway. So the judge wisely made it crystal clear from the bench, you are not removing him.
Danny Savalos, stick with us. Just kidding. Thank you very much.
I don't know how you guys do this. I'm exhausted.
Thanks, Danny.
All right, in other news now, police in Los Angeles arrested several gang members who are allegedly part of a sophisticated crew of burglars. They're accused of nearly 100 home break-ins across the city. Authorities say the suspects used high-tech tactics to target upscale neighborhoods. NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz has more on these arrests.
Los Angeles police busting what they describe as a prolific burglary ring responsible for 92 home break-ins across the city.
10 suspects, all adult career criminals with prior arrests for violent and property crimes, have been identified.
Authorities say the suspects, ranging in age from 20 to 47, call themselves the Rich Rollin Burglary Crew, part of a South LA gang that uses advanced technology to target multiple high-end neighborhoods.
They are sophisticated. They do things like have the ability to jam your Wi-Fi cameras, jam your Wi-Fi alarms.
The arrests come amid a wider string of home break-ins, from celebrities to everyday residents, like this recent heist showing mass thieves fleeing a home with duffel bags full of ransacked items. The victim saying it happened just moments after he left his home, leading him to believe he was being watched.
We've seen cases where cameras have been put in flower beds across the street from the house.
According to police, during this latest round of arrests, authorities recovered multiple firearms and ammunition, burglary devices, including window punch tools, radios, face masks, headlamps, and cans of bear mace, and loads of stolen goods, from high-end jewelry to designer purses.
These are not crimes of need. These are crimes of greed. We're going to track you down, and we're going to put you in jail or prison.
Our thanks to Liz Kreutz for that report. The DA says that some of the arrested suspects who have prior convictions could now face life sentences if they're found guilty at trial.
Well, dry and windy conditions out west, where temperatures 10 to 20 degrees above normal, are helping fuel several wildfires. The Flat Fire in Central Oregon is leveling homes and forcing evacuations after burning nearly 22,000 acres. NBC News correspondent Morgan Chesky has the latest.
High winds and brutal heat fueling a bitter West Coast firefight. Flames in Central Oregon scorching homes and more than 21,000 acres. The fight to contain crucial from above, where key drops saved entire neighborhoods.
We did have some new growth yesterday, but caught it relatively early.
Red flag warnings now cover parts of Oregon, Washington, and California, where crews are battling the picket fire in Napa Valley. The terrain so rough, helicopters dropped off firefighters by day before searching for hot spots at night.
It's amazing. Yeah, I've never seen them run at night before this year, so it's pretty incredible.
Despite burning nearly 7,000 acres, crews say they've reached 13% containment and counting.
It's comforting to know that they were on it right away. We also got lucky with the wind.
In neighboring Nevada,
oh my God, the whole side of the RV!
Fierce winds whipping through the popular Burning Man festival this weekend. The 50-mile-per-hour gust destroying tents and temporarily shutting down entry, leaving thousands stuck in their cars for hours. Campsites covered in layer after layer of dust. Across the country, even New York wasn't immune to wild weather. Severe thunderstorms forced hundreds to take shelter at the state fair, where heavy rain and high winds wreaked absolute havoc.
All right, thanks for that report there.
All right, thanks, Morgan. Let's bring in meteorologist Angie Lassman for a look at what's in store for the West Coast today and the rest of the country.
Yeah, it's time for your morning news now weather. She's going to give us the latest. Angie, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning to you. We've, of course, got to talk about the heat out west. This got everyone's attention over the weekend, and you just heard how it's fueling the fire threat. That continues today. We'll show you exactly where here in a moment. But first, those heat alerts. 7 million people, including really just a good chunk of Washington in this. We've got Spokane. We've got Pendleton, stretching out towards Seattle, all under these heat advisories. advisories or warnings, and temperatures are going to once again surge back into those 90s, if not triple digits for a couple of spots. The first thing I noticed, Medford, 101. We're going to see a temperature over 10 degrees above normal for that place. Here as we get through the day today, 91 degrees in Portland, Spokane into the high 90s. So the oppressive heat continues for folks there into tomorrow as well. We don't see a whole lot of relief for this part of the country until we get into the end of our work week and really into our weekend. Will start to be fairly mild. It's not fall-like by any means, but it'll be more typical kind of temperatures across this area here as we round out our work week. Now, I mentioned those fire alerts. They're still in effect. We've got the dry, hot, and windy conditions lasting and really stretching from Crater Lake all the way down to Mount Shasta. You can see that red flag warning that's going to be in effect through the day today. So firefighters will continue to have some difficulty with those conditions there, and we're of course looking at the ingredients that help fight or help start and spread some of those fires. So a lot to watch there. Meanwhile, we've got rain across the southern tier of the country and essentially stretching from the southwest all the way back towards the southern plains and even inching towards the southeast. This is kind of an active morning, some thunderstorms across these areas, and no surprise that we've got flood alerts. Essentially, we're going to see some of this monsoonal moisture kind of ramp up here again as we get through the day today. And this is leaving us with the concern for some isolated flash flooding through the day today. But notice the rain for Salt Lake City, Denver, stretching down through New Mexico, Phoenix, parts of California, as well as Nevada included in this as well. And it doesn't stop for tomorrow. We've still got some of those rain chances sticking with us across the Rockies. It'll be mainly scattered showers and thunderstorms, but we'll see that flood risk increase across the southern plains. That'll ramp up into the later parts of your Wednesday. Today, here's the areas that we're looking at for concern. We've got some really impressive, intense hourly rainfall rates, but notice Santa Fe, Tucson, Salt Lake City, Reno, all in that slight risk for flash flooding as we get through the day today. And by the time it's all said and done through Thursday, I think the highest amounts we'll see will be focused across the plains, anywhere from 2 to 3 inches. So no surprise if we see a bit of flooding there as well, guys.
All right. Lots to watch, Angie. Thank you so much.
You got it.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.